A very warm good afternoon to all, and this brings us to the fourth edition of the International Igniting Mind lecture series, specifically from the Jagran School of Public Policy and International Affairs. I, Dr. Devanshu Srivastava, the head of this particular school, welcome you all in this very warm afternoon in a session that is going to be much more interesting than the weather which have been showcased for past 2 days. So to grace the occasion, I'll quickly introduce the panel to us. We have Dr. Sergey Sayapin, sir, with us. I welcome you, sir. And from India, we are sending you a warm good afternoon, and I hope is very required at a cooler place where you are. And I'm also joined by Dr. Reena Rajput ma'am, Raguraj Kulla sir, and Priya Sharma ma'am. So thank you so much, the faculty members. And as I am proceeding to start this particular session, I'll just take a couple of minutes to introduce our speaker for the day. Dr. Sayapin teaches and researches in the areas of international and criminal law, and is among Central Asia's leading experts on international conflict and security law. In 2012-2015, he worked in the communication department at the regional delegation of the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, in Central Asia. He is the author, co-author, and co-editor of 9 books and about 50 book chapters and academic articles on the legal regulation of the use of force, international criminal law, humanitarian action, and legal pedagogy. Dr. Sayapin regularly advises the ICRC, UNODC, and Central Asian states authorities on international law issues and appears in national and international mass media. In 2019, he contributed to the revised edition of the Criminal Code of Republic of Uzbekistan, and an entry about him was included in the 3rd volume of Ukrainian Encyclopedia of International Law. Dr. Sayapin is the founding editor-in-chief of the Central Asian Yearbook of International and Comparative Law and the sub-editor for Central Asia of the Brill Encyclopedia of International Law in Asia. I would also congratulate sir that he has been recently been promoted and he's now in charge there for the Center on the International Law. Welcome, sir. And on that note, I'll just hand over the stage to you. The audience are eagerly waiting to listen to you,
sir. Thank you very much, dear sir. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for kindly inviting me to talk to you today. I'm pleased and honored to be here with you. And hopefully the topic of international law will not be too boring for you. I'm saying this because at my university, I work both with students of law and of non-legal disciplines, such as international relations. And oftentimes, students who are not lawyers, at the beginning, they're somewhat skeptical about international law. They do not always see the importance of international law. They pay more attention to the realpolitik, which is important, of course. To them, categories and concepts such as the national interest play a major role, and it usually takes some time to show them that actually international policy, as well as domestic policy, and international law do not contradict each other, but instead they go hand in hand, they work together, and they shape each other. I like reminding my students of a phrase which is attributed to Louis Henkin, one of the leading authorities on international law in the world, who wrote that international law is about politics because it is made by political actors through political processes and for political ends. And so there is no real contradiction between law and policy. In fact, they do go together hand in hand. And understanding this helps immensely the students of international relations, public policy, political science, and law alike. On the other hand, I also work with students of domestic law who often do not understand the significance of international law either. They're used to thinking, they're accustomed to thinking in the framework of domestic legal orders. They're used to applying the rules of domestic civil law, of domestic criminal law, domestic constitutional law, and sometimes fail to look beyond the national borders. And in such cases, I also like to give them very simple examples to show how states work together to solve some of the common challenges that the world has been facing over the past decades and is facing now. And most obviously, the biggest challenge that the world is facing now is the COVID-19 pandemic. I guess the pandemic was a bit like a black swan to everyone. Nobody expected it to arrive and to arrive so suddenly. But the very concept of a black swan presupposes that it is sudden and unexpected. And now that the world has been struggling with the pandemic for about 9 months, and unfortunately, the virus has already killed more than 1 million people. So this casualty toll is comparable to the number of victims of genocide in Rwanda, for example, in 1994. And if we think about it, it's really frightening, because the casualty toll of this pandemic has already exceeded that of some wars that the world was confronted with in the past years. And obviously, the pandemic has affected pretty much every aspect of our lives. It has affected the international scene. And I keep asking myself whether international law could anyhow be helpful in contributing to shaping the world beyond and after the pandemic. And I think it is possible to give a positive answer to this question in at least some respects. And I will now try to brainstorm together with you regarding some aspects of how international law could be useful in shaping the post-COVID-19 world, in the hope that the pandemic will be over sometime in a foreseeable future. Well, the World Health Organization tells us that depending on the availability of the vaccine, the pandemic could last until sometime next year, maybe until sometime in 2022. But let's hope that it will be over the soonest, and the new world will not be much worse than it was before the pandemic. I would like to elaborate on 3 things. First, I'd like to say a few words about the problematic areas which have been exposed by the pandemic, and I will try to show the relationship between these problematic areas and international law. Second, I will say a few words about opportunities given by the pandemic in terms of how international law as a set of values, as a phenomenon, and international lawyers as people working with international law could contribute to rebuilding the world. And third, I will say a few words about how I see the teaching and studying of international law in settings such as ours, that is, at departments of international law and public policy, international relations, political science, because I do see quite a lot of convergences. I was told that if there are questions, and I hope there will be some, they will be asked at the end. So I will try to keep my speech fairly concise in order to have some time for questions and answers at the end. So regarding the first issue which I have identified, that is problems and challenges. Well, they're quite obvious. The world was not prepared for the pandemic, and it has exposed quite many deficiencies which existed fairly perpetually in the international system. I may be wrong, and if I am wrong, please tell me that I am. But now that I think about the beginning of this year, I keep asking myself, what if the World Health Organization declared the pandemic already in March. But what if international flights from China had been suspended already sometime in January? Would this have helped to stop the spread of the virus worldwide? And if my supposition is correct, it shows one of the major problems of the international system. It is bureaucratic, and decisions in the international system are unfortunately made more slowly than sometimes they should be made. It's difficult for me as an international lawyer to say whether I am right or wrong. Now I may have the benefit of hindsight. I could now suppose what could have happened if a decision had been made, not in March, but sometime in January, to suspend international flights from China. Maybe the world would not have faced such a devastating problem. Maybe it would have been possible to locate the virus within China and to combat it within China more successfully. But this brings me to one of my major points, which I like discussing with students. I like saying that lawyers are servants. Lawyers, if they are to be effective, they should observe what goes on around them, and they should propose workable legal solutions based on reality, based on science. And so the conclusion that I am leading all of us towards is that probably if medical specialists had told all of us in January, like, let us suspend international flights now for some time, and lawyers would have enacted the necessary rules. Actually, many of those rules have already been in place. If we think of the World Trade Organization, it is possible under the law of the World Trade Organization to suspend international trade if there is a significant danger to public health. So some of the rules were already in place. And so if lawyers had cooperated more successfully and more quickly with epidemiologists, with medical specialists already in January, then probably the problem would not have grown as dramatically, and it would not have reached the dimensions which it had reached. So the first point I am making now is that we lawyers, we should work with other colleagues, with other specialists, and we should serve all the other areas of life in order to propose workable solutions and better solutions to the emerging challenges. I like saying that lawyers should be servants. Lawyers should serve a reality, and they should respond to real challenges. And this can only be done if a lawyer understands a problem in question. And so, unfortunately, the situation this year showed that the international system is bureaucratic and was slow in decision making. Some decisions should have been made earlier. So probably if we learn this lesson and take it into the post-COVID-19 world, it will be possible for all of us, for the legal community, for other specialist communities, and for states at another level to cooperate more successfully in combating many challenges that the world will continue facing. The next point I would like to make is exactly about cooperation. Probably the major goal of all international law is about cooperation. International law is there to facilitate cooperation among different states. Objectively, we are different as peoples. We all have different cultures, different religions, somewhat different values, although most of our values are common to all humankind, and this is beautiful. Although we are different, we are all humans, and this makes international law possible, because international law is one of the common languages that different members of the human family talk to each other. Yes, we are objectively different, and I like believing that our beauty is in our differences. Like, we should not make differences into problems. Bad people are able to turn differences into problems, and they play on that. And this is why we have conflicts. This is why we have wars. This is why we have hatred. This is why we have sometimes genocides. It's because bad people overemphasize our differences and try to say that some people are better than others. No, international law is not about this. International law acknowledges that although we are different, we can cooperate, and we should cooperate. We should work together. And the fact that COVID-19 was able to spread throughout the world in a matter of a mere 2 months showed that there was some lack of cooperation, or at least some lack of communication among states, be it in the framework of the World Health Organization or be it outside the WHO. It is understandable that COVID-19 was something new. It is understandable that medical specialists could not say right away that, hey, these are the dangers of the virus. It is understandable that it took some time for specialists to study the virus and to understand how it should behave. But during this period of uncertainty, there was a lack of communication and a lack of cooperation, which made it possible for the problem to grow. So the next point I am making is that we should learn as a community of specialists, lawyers, and political scientists and other decision makers, but also states at their level. We should work to cooperate, to work with each other more successfully on the basis of rules that we shall all together agree upon. And of course, these rules are those of international law. My next point is about rulemaking. If we all agree that we'll have some rules pertaining to a certain subject or to a certain area, then it will be much easier for all of us to respond to the many challenges that we face. Now the whole world is thinking almost all of the time about COVID-19. But in addition to that, the problems that existed before the pandemic, they didn't go away. They're there. Maybe they were suspended. Maybe they were moved somehow to the background, but the climate change problem is there. The environmental degradation is there. The threat of international terrorism is there. Wars and other armed conflicts are there. Problems with human rights throughout the world are there. And if we think about it, the pandemic exacerbated some of these issues. Think of the Black Lives Matter movement which began in the United States of America and then spilled over to some other countries. We may have different opinions about the ideology of this movement. I would personally say that all lives matter. I know that some ideologists of this movement, they are very much against this point of view, and they have their point. It is a historical fact that the ancestors of contemporary African Americans, they did suffer, just as the ancestors of many other peoples did suffer because of colonialism, because of exploitation, because of this current division into the global north and global south. It is a historical fact, but this leads me personally, and if you want to discuss it in the questions and answer session, I would be happy to listen to your opinions. But I think personally that all lives matter, and it is up to all of us to finally understand and accept the value of human lives as such, irrespective of our colors, creeds, religions, and other differences, because we are all human. And so, now the point I am leading us towards is that all those other problematic issues, all those other pre-existing challenges, they will re-emerge sometime soon. Now the world appears to be learning how to struggle with the virus little by little. And so sooner or later, the world will come back to thinking again about climate change, about human rights, about wars, especially given that some of these problems, well, they reminded of themselves in the recent months. Think of the armed clashes between India and China a few months ago. Think of the armed confrontation which is now going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the Caucasus. The United Nations called upon everyone, upon all nations and other international actors to suspend hostilities for the time of the pandemic. And luckily enough, many international actors responded to the call, which actually gives us hope, probably, that peace is not that unachievable if peoples and states really want it. So the Security Council of the United Nations issued a call upon the nations of the world a few months ago to suspend hostilities until the end of the pandemic, and many international actors did respond to the call, with some exceptions. This does give me hope that if nations want peace, or if they want to prioritize peace over something else, they can do it. Now, with your permission, let me move to the second part of my speech. Opportunities which the pandemic presented us with. And I've already mentioned one of these opportunities, the international response to the call to suspend hostilities. It was an opportunity that was seized, luckily. I'm just hoping that nations will understand the significance of this particular opportunity, and they will take this lesson with them into the future beyond the virus, that they will learn the value of peace. The other opportunities which are there concern, for example, education. We as educators and as students, we have been confronted with something unprecedented a few months ago. Suddenly we understood that we could not go to our universities anymore, that we had to transition to online teaching. And I am sure that pretty much everyone around the world was puzzled. Like, what should we do now? How should we continue our classes? How are we supposed to meet our students? Should we now take a break and like suspend our teaching and learning, or should we learn adapting to the new situation? And obviously now we can all say that we have been relatively successful in adapting ourselves to this situation. I'm saying relatively because I know that many students and teachers are not quite happy with online education as a phenomenon. Many of my students tell me that we want to go back to the university finally because we need to meet our friends. So many of my students are quite happy with the quality of online education they get. Many are happy to stay at home and to have tea and coffee during their classes. It's quite comfortable. But what they are missing is communication with their teachers, is meetings with their friends, because some of my students told me they would love to go back to the university, not because of the buildings, not because of the facilities, but because of people whom they are missing. And this is an opportunity that I hope we shall take with us into our future life. The pandemic gave all of us an opportunity to reassess the value of human communication, to reassess the value of being together, of belonging together. And international law is in fact about that. It's about working together to respond to the challenges we face. So if we accept this as a value, then I could say that we are all international lawyers in our spirit. Another problem that was exposed by COVID-19 in connection with education, and I hope the governments will take it seriously, is of course the problem of poverty. It is a significant issue throughout the world. According to reports by international financial agencies, millions of people will have lost their jobs because of the pandemic, and millions of people will not be having enough food. And as far as education is concerned, I read recently that in Kazakhstan, in the country where I work and live now, but also in some other countries, such as, for instance, in Indonesia, I read a similar report about Indonesia. Some students were experiencing significant issues with online education because of their financial situation. Because what do we need for online education? We need computers. We need high quality online connection. We need So we need high-speed internet and we need unlimited traffic. And it turned out in Kazakhstan that literally hundreds of thousands of families did not have computers. And so for this reason alone, children in those families would have difficulties with online education. In that article about Indonesia, which I read, the problem of high-speed internet and of unlimited traffic was raised. And so governments, if they want to come out of this crisis relatively successfully without losing too much quality of education, they should think of redistributing funds, for example, from their military expenditures towards education, towards healthcare, towards other social areas, especially given that now many governments have responded to the call to suspend hostilities. So I suppose it should be possible to redistribute some money from the military budget to the civilian budget. The next lesson that we should learn, if we are to be better prepared for future crises, and there will be other similar crises. Again, the World Health Organization said some time ago that there could be other viruses in the future, which could be about as deadly as COVID-19, and so the world should be prepared for other similar challenges. So in order to be prepared for that, I believe governments should accord greater respect to the professions of doctors and educators. Supposedly, the significance and gravity of the pandemic, which it has reached, was because the world did not take the problem seriously, and because at least in some countries the medical profession was neglected. And at least we speak about this in some countries of the post-Soviet states. I hope that some post-Soviet countries and also other countries in the world that feel to have gone through a similar experience will rethink their understanding of the value of the medical profession and will invest more in equipping their hospitals, in training their doctors, nurses, and other medical personnel, and will pay medical personnel better salaries in order to show them respect, but at the end to make societies better protected against such threats. And I suppose that a similar logic should apply to teachers, because teachers lay foundations for the future through their students. And finally, in the third part of my speech, I would like to say a few words about how we as educators could work together with our students to make international law better understood and having a greater practical significance in our work, but not just for the sake of our work, but ultimately for the benefit of our societies. I like to tell my students, please look around yourselves. What are the issues that we are having in our society? And students usually say, well, we have the problems of poverty, of criminality, of human rights, of economic development, environmental issues, etc. And then I ask them, what do you think needs to be done to respond to those challenges? Often students will say, no state can cope with these challenges on its own. True, there are some purely domestic issues. There are some problems that exist in one country and they are not taken seriously in another country simply because this problem is specific to this country. But oftentimes there will be challenges which are shared across societies and across international borders, or else there will be challenges which are similar in different societies and in different states. And so it is then that I invite my students to say, but this is what we have international law and international institutions for. Even the richest and most powerful states cannot cope with global challenges on their own. Think of the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States in 2001. The United States is the biggest economy on earth. It's the most important military power on the planet, but they were not able to cope with the challenge of international terrorism on their own. And the same is true for problems such as the environment, such as international crime, such as human rights, or poverty. I like giving my students another example. Say, can you tell me the brands of your smartphones? Well, they look at their smartphones and say, well, some are American, others are Chinese, and then I tell them, how come that you are here in Kazakhstan, but you have all these international brands of smartphones? And they say, well, because of international trade. So they come rationally to this very useful conclusion that international trade became possible because of joint efforts on the part of different states, because states, well, in fact, their politicians understood that cooperating and working together is better than arguing and having conflicts. It's because once politicians understood that trading is better than making wars. And essentially, this is what international law is about. International law is about, well, historically it was about war and peace, but now it's the other way around. It's about peace and sometimes war. And if we as international lawyers and political scientists who are decision makers, if we work together to understand and to promote the ideas and values of peace and the benefits which peace brings to all of us, then I hope this world will be a better place. It has already begun. It has already become a better place over the past 75 years, since the foundation of the United Nations. I keep telling my students that the world today is safer. It has less wars. It has less conflicts. It has less diseases. It has less problems than there had been historically. And this is it is the merit of the United Nations. It is definitely the achievement of cooperation of all nations in the world through this multilateral institution that made the world a better, safer, healthier, relatively richer, and better place. On the other hand, there's still a lot to be done, and I hope that if we work together as intellectuals, as policymakers, and we do our joint work for the joint benefit of our societies, then we shall be able to see an even better world already in our lifetime. It is my sincere hope, and the very fact that that we are now talking about these things testifies, in my humble opinion, to the feasibility of this. We are distant in physical terms. There are thousands of kilometers between us. Were it not for Facebook, we would not have met each other virtually. But now we're having this discussion. Now I feel that we are sharing the similar values. Now I feel that we are on the same page, because we are all members of the same human family, and hopefully we shall be able to travel again more freely. Hopefully we shall be able to meet at conferences again, and well, hopefully, and let I hope this will sound correctly, but I'm somehow grateful to this pandemic for having met all of you and other colleagues in the other parts of the world. Why was it possible? Because we took the situation not only as a challenge, as a threat, but also as an opportunity. I hope that we'll take this communication among us into the future. I hope that we shall continue using the useful tools such as this video conferencing technology also in the future, because it proved itself as a relatively easy to use, relatively cheap, and quite convenient tool. I hope that we'll take into the future the lesson of communication and of valuing each other as people, as personalities. These are very important things which I learned in these months, and I hope that I will not forget these lessons when the pandemic is over, and it will be over one day. Let me finish on this note. Let me thank you once again very much for your kind invitation to speak to you. And now, if there are some questions, I will try to offer some humble opinions in response to those questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm afraid I can't hear you. Sorry. Can it be that you're muted? Now I can hear something again. No. Oh, let me see. I see a question in the text box. International law is in consonance with laws of natural law of justice. Then why developed nations are reluctant to democratize the United Nations Security Council and make it more representative? So, if hopefully I will be able to hear you again. But if not, please just copy and paste it into the chat box, and I'll be able to read it. Well, my guess is that I will answer the way I understand, and if you disagree, please do so. But I'll be honest in my in my answering this question. A lot of modern international law dates back to 1945, in particular, the law of the United Nations. As I said a few minutes ago, the United Nations did a great job to make the world a better place, and truly so. However, the United Nations was designed in 1945 in such a way as to perpetuate the powers and influence of the strong and powerful ones. So of those who were strong and powerful then 75 years ago, in particular, the permanent members of the Security Council, of those states who were to become permanent members of the Security Council. So those provisions in the United Nations Charter were certainly drafted by the future permanent members of the Security Council for their own benefit. The United States of America, for instance, only agreed to join the United Nations on the condition that they will be a permanent member of the Security Council having a veto power. If we think about another example, the Charter of the United Nations still mentions the Republic of China, and now the permanent seat in the Security Council is owned by the People's Republic of China, which is another Chinese government. Or else, the Charter of the United Nations still mentions the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which was dissolved in 1991. The seat of the USSR was taken over by Russia, but the Charter of the United Nations was still not amended. It still mentions those states, so the state that does not exist anymore, the USSR, and the Republic of China, which is not in power anymore. So my firm point is that if the United Nations is ever to be reformed, it must be this must be one of the aspects that need reforms. The membership of the Security Council certainly needs to change, and there are several ways of possibly changing it. One way is to abolish the veto power, but I'm afraid that the states that currently do have the veto power will not agree to that option. Another option will be to enlarge the membership and to from 15 members probably to 25, and include more states as non-permanent members of the Security Council in order to make its composition and membership more representative. A third way, and I'd personally favor this option, is to enlarge the number of permanent members by countries such as India, which is the second largest country in the world in terms of population, and quite soon it will become number one in terms of population in the world. Or South Africa. Africa is now not represented in the permanent membership of the Security Council at all. Or countries like Brazil, or Germany and Japan. Germany being the largest European economy, and Japan being the second biggest contributor to the budget of the United Nations. For decades after the Second World War, Germany and Japan were regarded, for obvious reasons, as enemy nations for the purpose of the United Nations, and several decades ago there could not be any talk of making Germany or Japan a permanent member of the Security Council. But now they're both democratic nations, now they're both peace-loving nations in the sense of the UN Charter, and I think that their permanent membership in the Security Council could be considered along with that of nations such as India, Brazil, or South Africa.
Very well answered. And now I hope that I am audible as well.
Yes, now I can hear you, sir.
So I'm so sorry for that technical thing that happened. Thank you so much, sir. That was a wonderful answer. So we have one question by a first year student from our UG batch that Prerna this side for the question that she asked, what steps must be taken by the United Nations and WHO to stop this situation like COVID, and not also like the future COVID thing should also exist?
Very difficult question. And based on what I said earlier, I believe that this question should better be asked to medical specialists. No, really, because this is a question of, at least in part, it's a question of a medical nature. What should be done in order to prevent situations like COVID in the future? I believe that epidemiologists should be best placed to answer this question. But of course, lawyers and political scientists should work together with epidemiologists in order to answer the first part of the question: what should the United Nations do? So to react more effectively to pandemics like COVID-19. My answer should be as follows. We should, the policymakers should listen to epidemiologists. Proposals by epidemiologists should be based on scientific evidence, and somehow this scientific evidence should be translated into rules of law that everybody should then follow. I know that I may sound simplistic now, but this is really the way it should work. Specialists, whenever there is a challenge, a response to the challenge must be offered by specialists in the respective area, such as epidemiology. Policymakers should take up this response together with their colleagues in other countries, if need be, as quickly as possible. And this brings me to my very first point in this presentation about bureaucracy. So policymakers should do their part of the job to reduce bureaucracy. And lawyers, of whom there are many in the United Nations, lawyers should translate the response from epidemiologists into the language of law that would be understandable for everyone. Because the ultimate purpose of any rule of law is to be understood by everyone and to be followed by everyone. That's why rules of law must be phrased in a language that is understandable. They must be reflective of common sense. That is, this is why we need scientific evidence. So opinions from professionals based on science, and rules of law must be acceptable to the members of society. So if I could give us a simple example, like doctors tell us, ladies and gentlemen, please wear face masks. According to scientific evidence, this is one of the very efficient ways to reduce the spread of COVID-19. It does not, wearing face masks does not provide 100% guarantee that one will not be infected, but it does reduce the probability of infection. And so the policymakers and lawyers should not just make this a rule of law, saying that if you, ladies and gentlemen, do not wear masks, you will be fined, or else you will go to jail. That is, there will be some punishment for violation of the rule. But somehow this rule must be made acceptable to society as a whole, to show that this simple thing is useful. Like, this is for our common good. If all of us just put on a mask when visiting a public place, this will serve a common good. This is how I see this. I see that efficient reactions to challenges like COVID-19 or in other similar situations should consist in effective cooperation between specialists, policymakers, and lawyers who should make good and effective rules that would be acceptable to society.
Thank you so much. I guess that would be one of those particular things where United Nations should come in together with all the agencies and take ahead and to plan also. But I'll also agree that situations like COVID-19 and where you rightly mentioned that this was a situation of the Black Swan thing, where we were not ready even, and like with the coming of like with the past of 9 months, we have been trying and testing things that whether N95 mask would be a type of a precaution or this vaccine would be a precaution. But until less nothing comes across, the precautions definitely would be working across. So we have one more question, and this is in regards to the concept of how the biological and the chemical warfare is one of the technique. Can COVID-19 come out to be of such a kind of a proto warfare? Are there any international law or a future law, or should it come across to hold the countries accountable? I guess the question has been asked by one of our students from the MA batch, Mayank, and he is trying to come across with a point where he himself has taken this thing that it was all China behind this particular thing, that how it came across and whether it was made in the lab or it was a generated thing. So yeah, so your take as per like what should be the role of international law in taking countries, because we know that the biological conventions and the chemical warfare conventions are already existing in international law. But if in cases of pandemics and other things, what should be the take across?
Thank you. And I must say that I will not be able to answer this question in full because I do not have full information, and no one has full information about it for obvious reasons. Like we don't know the exact origin of the virus. The official version is that it had natural origins, and the World Health Organization seems to support this version. There's also an alternative version that this could be the virus could have been man-made, and well, I personally take this version fairly seriously because one of the first people who put it forward was a Nobel Prize winner in medicine. So the person who understood the nature of HIV. So I would not disregard this option entirely because of the source, because of the qualification of the man who made this version public. But having said that, I don't know for sure the origin of COVID-19, and therefore the question of China's responsibility for this virus could, in my opinion, or should even, in my opinion, be limited to the question of letting the virus cross China's international borders. That is one practical aspect that that needs to be addressed. Whether or not COVID-19 is a biological weapon, well, that's a question. Obviously, weapons are produced for military purposes, and at least now there is no evidence that it was produced and that it was produced for this very purpose. China's responsibility could be invoked in as far as the spread of the virus through international aviation is concerned. And by the way, a few months ago, there was a very interesting blog post about this on the blog of the European Journal of International Law. By the way, dear colleagues, if you're interested in international law issues, let me invite you to read international law blogs such as ejiltalk.org or opiniojuris.org. They're very useful in reacting quickly to ongoing developments in international law. And so a few months ago, there was a very interesting blog post on ejiltalk exactly about China's possible responsibility as a state for the spread of the virus through aviation. And the blog post was authored by a specialist in international aviation law, which I am not. So I will not be able to address the nuances of that regulation because I specialize in other areas of international law. But the overall logic was that the rules of the International Civil Aviation Organization already exist to reduce risks related to the spread of infectious diseases. And the virus could spread throughout the world so quickly because someone willfully or not willfully disregarded those rules of the International Civil Aviation Organization. So specialists in international aviation law should be better placed to comment on this, but because at least one of them published this blog post, I suppose that there's some truth to it. Second, China's international responsibility could be invoked, I suppose, as far as international trade law is concerned, because the virus affected immensely international trade, especially the free movement of personnel, and of course the trade in international trade in goods and services. It is a fact that international economy is now experiencing a crisis which is unique. The international economic and financial institutions predict that it will take several years for the international economy to recover, and so if in the future a link is established between some aspects of China's conduct as a state and this the downfall in the world's economy, then I think probably China's responsibility could be invoked in at least some respects in the World Trade Organization. But this remains to be seen. A few months ago, a group of states called upon carrying out an international inquiry into China's responsibility in the spread of COVID-19. Let us wait for more evidence to be available. Let me put it this way, because we as lawyers, we have to we have to base our conclusions on evidence. So if in the future there is conclusive evidence regarding China's role, I suppose it was negligent. So I dare not say it was willful, although there are some opinions to the effect that China could be benefiting from the situation as a whole in economic terms, but I dare not believe that it was willful. Let me say that if there was some negligence on the part of China in letting this situation happen, then China's responsibility could be invoked in at least some areas of international trade law as well.
Yeah, so thank you so much, sir. And with your due permission, I would also like to say the same thing, that the countries, as in what the international law also does so, the sanction in the indirect form of abolishing or prohibiting the trade out there. So that has been already been started by the major of the countries in the world as well. So we'll take, I guess we have already exceeded the time. So there were a couple of more questions out there. So I'll take one more question, which is in relation to the global warming and climate change. And this happens to be the last question. So the global warming and climate change is a consequence of industrial revolution, but the environmental and the biodiversity restoration is more responsible of benefiting nations. It is logical, legally, and morally. However, international law and selective legal community has double standards on it. Developed countries, especially US, is indifferent. How in future can we make realize the environmental goals and ecological cooperation?
I would suggest to proceed as follows. I understand the concern of the author of the question, and moreover I share this concern, as we all live in the global south, and it is an unfortunate fact that although international law has already contributed to making the voices of the nations of the global south heard, there is still some, should I say, post-colonial legacy in international law. Yeah, I guess it is the right word. This is why we have in international law such an intellectual movement as TWAIL, the Third World Approaches to International Law. So the members of this movement work hard on exposing the concerns which the third world states, the developing nations, are experiencing. And the climate change and global warming, because of the post-colonial legacy in international economic law, is exactly one of such concerns. Rich multinational companies transfer their businesses to the global south, where labor is cheaper, where environmental standards are not as strict as in the global north, like as in the European Union, for example. And so the problem continues, the problem of environmental degradation continues persisting because well, I'm trying to how to better phrase it, because and let me be fairly direct, because developing nations, I believe, could be firmer now in asserting their lawful interests. It is the lawful interest of developing nations to protect the environment, to introduce better labor standards, to to introduce better human rights standards as far as the rights of workers are concerned. I think nations in the global south should be more assertive in their dialogue with developed nations of the global north, in promoting and defending their environmental interests, the interests of their workers, and gradually raise the benchmarks, gradually introduce domestic legislation that would result in the improvement of local environmental conditions. You see what I mean? In other words, developing nations in the global south should be more assertive in their dialogue with their developed counterparts in the global north, because in the end, everybody should understand that this planet is our common home. It simply cannot be that the environment will get worse and worse in the south, and it will remain good in the north. It simply cannot be, because the world is interconnected. It simply cannot be that the rights of workers in the south will be relatively disregarded at the expense of people somewhere else, because the north cannot be well off without the south, which is relatively well off. This world is an interconnected system, and so I believe that problems such as the environment in the global south can be relatively well addressed if the states in the global south speak out for themselves more assertively.
Very true, sir. Very true. And I'll just like to just add on to that, that I guess that's where the name, the United Nations, was there. That all the nations, irrespective of their country, size or something, they are united. So it's not the blocking system which is there. And that is where also when we frame the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and this was in our mind that the environment is not one that is separate for South and separate for North or something like that. It's common, and it is for common respectable thing, not to be like utilized and atrocitated in such a way. So thank you so much. I guess that would come to the...
say it better than you did, sir. Thank you very much.
So the last thing on that note would be the role of because I'll take a hint of what I've made a very important notes onto what you have mentioned across. One very thing that I've underlined is the opportunities that we can go together as educators and in intellectuals and in education institutions. So Sergey sir will be looking forward at some places where we can combinedly or collaboratively work. Both like you at the KIMEP University in Kazakhstan and we us there at Jagran Lakecity University in Bhopal. So I'm looking forward for that particular thing. Any help, any assistance, and where we can involve our students, both in the mutual capacity, that your students from your university or our students here, we can come across with something in the light of particularly international law. That would be really nice. And would also look forward to this ending of this pandemic so that we can physically have you. I agree that that was one of the opportunities which COVID gave. Else it would have been very tough to get you on campus, because I know the responsibilities which you have out there and the vice versa thing. So, but yeah, this COVID has led this barrier open, where intellectuals like you have come, addressed and share your thoughts. And I'm knowing that the motto of our university, that is igniting minds and changing lives, and this I which we have added, that the International Igniting Minds lecture, to have people from of your stature being here with an international perspective, with an international mindset, and getting international law also, and igniting the minds of our young achievers who are in achievers in making, because the ultimate thing are there for themselves. So the students, and for their benefit, what all thoughts that have you given today, we are so thankful for you for sparing out time and being there. We'll stay in touch, sir, for whatever things are there. We'll love to be there with the capacities which you are associated with. So we'll be trying to be partnering with them. We'll be trying to be with you. And any place or any point where we as faculties can be collaborated, or our students can be benefited, the university and all its employees and all its professionals are very much ready for that. So thank you so much, sir. Yeah, so thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful time. And I believe me, it never felt like we are just crossing an hour or an hour and a half mark so quickly. So thank you so much for that wonderful time, for that wonderful thoughts and the brilliant answers that the students have raised. So thank you so much, sir, on my personal behalf as well, and on behalf of the entire university, on behalf of my faculties. Thank you so much. And it was lovely to have you, and we'll stay in connected, sir. So for any of the future things as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind invitation once again. And I'm sure that this was our first opportunity to cooperate,
exactly,
but definitely not the last. Let's
surely we'll remember these words, and I'll keep on writing you mails. I'll keep on disturbing you for things across, so that we can be there. So thank you so much, sir. It was indeed great to have you.